So today we've got an interesting little project to work on. We are going to be building a portable power chair lighting kit. One that is powered from the charging port on your chair and just uses magnets or clamps or however you decide to mount it. I think this is something I mentioned in a video a long time ago that it might be cool to make and sell. But regardless, I figured we should go over the parts that I purchased for this. I'm going to link everything down below, and obviously you can customize it to your own needs. Most wheelchair manufacturers don't want you to power things from the charging port on your chair, but let's be honest, some little lights that pull maybe 1.5 amps are not going to be an issue. And also, if you think about it, there's a lot of aftermarket accessories that chair manufacturers will use themselves to power things like a breathing machine or a ventilator or something like that, and those connect to the charging ports on the chair, so I wouldn't necessarily worry about this. Now this video is a little bit different than typical. It's going to be a long form build video, so I think it's over 45 minutes long, but we're basically going to go step by step. I'm going to show you how I build all this and maybe give you some inspiration of how you could do this yourself. We're going to be using a right angle XLR connector. You'll see they're a little bit fidgety, but I'm going to link some other stuff down in the video description that may work a little bit better for you. But there are a few warnings and whatnot I have, and a few little things you need to know. So anyways, hopefully you enjoy. Let's get this project on the road. My lovely cluttered workbench. Here's the parts we have selected for this build. These are some 24 volt compatible LED lights that come with some mounting hardware. And it's pretty easy to find 24 volt compatible lights if you look around on Amazon. A lot of the import stuff is multi-voltage, so these in the past, well, I've used these on a bunch of different chairs, but these will typically work on anything from 9 to 32 volts, something like that. But they have these nice little housings. These are kind of a combo spot slash flood beam, and they're not so bright that they're useless, because when you get lights that are really bright, it makes everything else around you darker by contrast, especially at night. But I've used these on a bunch of different chairs. They've gone through a few revisions over the years. The old ones, this mounting piece used to be separate, but it's now all molded into one piece, which is nice. And they come with these little mounting brackets here. There's a hole in the bottom, and these essentially just kind of slide over the top here and you run a bolt through. Now I'm going to be installing this on a friend's chair. I probably won't show that in this video, but in his case, he doesn't have foot plates on his chair. So it's going to be a lot easier just to magnetically attach these to the bottom of his seat pan. And for that, I found these little rare earth neodymium magnets, and they already have a bolt sticking out of them. I think, yeah, they're fairly strong. They have a nice rubberized coating on them as well. So I think these should work fine. They're M6 bolts, so they should, yeah, they fit right in there. We'll probably have to space these up with some nuts or washers, because once this is on here, there isn't a whole lot of clearance for a super long bolt in there. But I figure this should be a nice thing we can just attach to his chair. Then we have some sort of generic-y wire. I think this is 18 gauge double conductor, and it is also double shielded, which means we have a nice coating over it that's round, and inside we have two smaller wires that also have their own insulation on them. So that should work nicely. Then for ease of compatibility with different chairs, seeing as how this is a portable kit, I got these clockable XLR connectors. These used to be pretty expensive, but I think this pair of them was about $6 at this point. Again, all this will be linked down below. But what these do is allow you to have a nice right angle connection. So when you plug it into your joystick, the wire points straight down instead of hanging out this direction quite some distance. And also on some older Invacare and other brands of chairs, the charging ports are not the same orientation. Some of them might be this way or that way, or even upside down in the case of some of the Omnis out there. So this allows you to take it apart and basically adjust this to any angle you need. And this wire I selected here is just about the right size to fit through this strain relief here. And lastly, well, I didn't order new fuses, I already have some old ones, but lastly we have one of these things that we're going to use for a power switch. My friend's chair has a lot of round bars for the armrests and things like that, so I figured one of these adjustable clamps that's stuck on there, one of these adjustable clamp mounted switches that's designed for motorcycles would work really well for him. We have a giant on button and then off. So This should be fairly easy to mount somewhere on the chair and just turn it on and off real easily. And these lights don't pull much amperage, so a switch like this isn't going to be an issue. Actually, you can see right down into the inner workings on this one. I knew this thing was inexpensive, but interesting that there is zero weather sealing on this whatsoever. It looks like when you mount it to the chair, the bar itself is actually going to block stuff from going down in there. I think you can see all that. You can see the action and the contacts in there, but that should be fine. And then also, obviously, we need to use an inline fuse for this, which I have around here somewhere. I didn't want to buy other ones because I have lots of this. So anyways, we're going to go through kind of wiring this up and show you the basic layout of this thing, and we'll go from there. We're going to start off here by wiring up this XLR connector that goes to the charging port. And for that, we just need a Phillips screwdriver and a soldering iron. The thing to remember when you're buying connectors like this, you can find the audio versions of these things, because XLR is obviously something that's used for microphones a lot, but you can find them already pre-wired in sort of a pigtail. You have to be really careful with that though, because I found a lot of times the shielding or the grounding will be attached in such a way that will short out when you try to feed power through it. So I always like to wire these things up myself. That way I know it's done correctly and we're not going to have an issue. The thing to remember with the charging port on your chair is it is always directly connected to the batteries, even if the chair is powered off. So you have to be really careful with that. On the back of these particular connectors, you're going to have a couple of Phillips screws that hold the back housing on. Then you'll take that off. And then there's a little plastic shield in here that will come off as well. That just kind of slips down inside there. Then the entire XLR socket will pull out of here, and this has your pins that connect to your chair. Now when you put this back in, you can see that it'll latch down, I think, into one of 7 different positions. So as we turn this and lock it down, you can see it changes our angle here. So that's pretty handy. And also, I just like right angle connectors. So we'll unscrew the strain relief here, pull that out. If we look down in here, you can see we have a hole of some size, and that should be roughly compatible with the wiring I have selected. I use these same connectors when I build up the remote kill switches for the power soccer chairs. But if you notice here, it fits through there just fine. And then also, it might be a little bit small for this, but once this clamps down, it'll hold it nice and tightly in place. So we will feed this through like so, then feed this through here, mostly so we don't forget about it later. Then we want to strip these wires, and these lovely Klein automatic wire strippers showed it from the gift list. Thank you to the person that bought these for me. Yeah, it looks like it stripped those nicely. Then let's figure out how long we want to make these things. And then as you can see, between the strain relief and the connections, we don't have a lot of distance here. So I'm going to cut these fairly short and then spiral them around so that they will go to the proper connections. The only catch with these is if these wires are too long, it's going to make a mess out of everything trying to get it all tucked back in here. And if you pull this too far through, now when we tighten this down, the strain relief has nothing to grab a hold of. So this needs to be basically right there, and then our wires as short as possible and soldered directly on. And again, the important thing you want to remember here is that there is no damage to the insulation of these wires. Again, our batteries are always connected and always powered on. So if we have any insulation damage right here or shorting going on, this whole thing's going to try and light on fire. There obviously isn't enough room to put a fuse right here. It's going to be further down the line. So we have to be very careful when we're wiring and soldering all this up. We don't have any stray strands or anything like that. Let's make sure this is in the orientation we want. There we go. We're going to push these back through here. And the other thing to make sure you're getting correct too is the pin out for positive and negative on this. And again, power wheelchairs do not have chassis ground. You do not want to ground anything to the chassis of the chair. Doing that is going to cause ground loops and major issues, and things will go on fire for sure. Now, this is a little bit tricky. I'm trying to remember how I did it previously, because once we get this in here, there isn't really room to pull it back out. Yeah, this is going to be a little bit tedious. So I'm just going to shut up here for a minute and see if we can get this figured out. Other styles of connectors, you can pull this whole thing out of here and put it together and then put it back in. But this one, you can't really do that. So there isn't enough clearance to take everything apart. So let me get these tinned and we will attempt to get all of this put together. Our tolerances are extremely tight in here, so it takes a lot of sorcery and fine motor control to get this all connected without shorting something out. And these pins are pretty small, so I'm going to trim these down a little bit now that we've tinned them. And then I've got some non-serrated bent needle nose pliers. I'm going to kind of bend these down like so. That should make them a little bit easier to get into this connector. So these need to connect up to these two pins here. And as you can see, the edge of our wall is right there. So it's real easy, if you look at that red wire, it's real easy to accidentally short these out. And I need to bend this one a little bit more. And I don't pre-tin the connectors because that fills up the little sort of cup or cutout for the wire there. And everything gets really messy in a hurry. Okay. Let's see if we can do this without anything moving. I'm going to turn the heat up pretty high on the soldering iron. And you have to be careful when you're heating these up because these go into plastic. So you can very easily damage your, what is it, $3.50 connector or whatever as you're doing this. I'm not using the helping hands for this because everything moves really easily and this is kind of a big part. Okay, I'm going to let that cool for just a minute. Again, we have to be very careful with the amount of heat we put in here. I'm going to use my old man magnifying glasses here to inspect this. It's not perfect, but it is secure. How tightly can we focus this camera? Yeah, there you can see it's not 100% flush with the cutout, but it's a nice high temp solder connection. We do have, you know, some little tiny spikes sticking out right here, but that's not going anywhere and it's not going to short out on the side of the connector. We can double check this real quick by gently grabbing it with the pliers and kind of moving it around. And you can see there's no strand sticking out and that should be fine. Let's see if we can get the other side attached as well. Just double check our orientation here to make sure it's correct. Nothing sucks more to do all this work and then realize you've got it in there sideways or backwards or something. Oh, I just realized I can kind of push this out a little bit with my finger. Then we have room. Ah, did you hear that? It snapped into place. Okay, I'm gonna pull the helping hands over here now. Yeah, see what I mean? This stuff is just a little bit heavy to hold. All right, not the best viewing angle, but let me get this on here. How did we turn out here? Actually, I think that might be okay. Yeah, we don't have any clearance issues, and it is firmly attached. That's not going anywhere. So once we push this down in, we can get our little safety cap in here and it kind of shields everything a little bit. That is protecting the connectors on both sides, and we have clearance here on the top. So I think that should serve our purposes. I'm going to push this all down into place with my finger and make sure we didn't melt any of these pins out of position. These pins are a little bit free floating in here. You can see it kind of wiggles. I can't tell if one of them's out of position or not, but I think we should be okay. So next up, I'm going to illustrate how this strain, oh, let me clean the soldering iron, tin it, and turn it back off here. like to try and save those soldering tips. So to show how this strain relief works, I'm gonna twist this on here, and you should be able to see these start clamping down on that wire. Yeah, see how those are kind of pulling down? I need to make sure that's not putting too much tension on the wire, so I'm gonna take this back out. I'm gonna push this through just to give it a little more slack. Now you'll notice right here that this angle is gonna change as we tighten this down because the whole thing is pulling it this direction. There we go. And that has bit into the wires. And you can see our angle here has changed a little bit, but we're not putting any stress on anything. That's not stripped right there. That's this is just a light reflection. If I move my hand over here, you can see it goes away. So it's not bare wire, even though it kind of looks like it. And now we have a solid connection here that's not going to come off, and we can continue on. So let's put this hoopty back together. And since all the parts of this are kind of free floating in here, you have to make sure that, see how the pins are kind of down near the bottom? So you have to kind of poke all this back into place. Make sure it gets lined up how it should be. There's a detent on this black part, and it has to be pushed into place. Otherwise, when you screw it all together, the pins won't be in the right order. I do really like these connectors simply because they can be adjusted, but they are, I'm not gonna lie, kind of a pain to set up, as you can see here. Just checking to make sure our gaps on all sides are even before we cinch that down. Final inspection, it looks like the pins are shifted down this way a little bit, but they might be okay. I'm gonna test fit it into my chair, but before I do that, I wanna find the other end of this cable and make sure these are not shorted out because again, your charging port is always live at battery voltage. So if these were touching like they appear to be, and I hook this up, it's going to immediately short out. So let's see if this fits in here. It's a little bit tight, but yeah, it seems to work fine. All right, cool, that's good. The other nice thing with these connectors is, like I said, everything kind of floats a little bit and there's a bit of tolerance for stuff like that. But just keep in mind that these can be out of place when you put the whole thing back together and yeah, potentially not gonna have a good time. This project is a little bit strange because we're gonna be attaching this to someone else's chair and I don't know the exact lengths of the wires and everything, so I'm just getting this stuff done beforehand as much as possible. Let's go ahead and get our lights set up here with the magnets. Kind of see how that's gonna work because it might take a little bit of finagling. These lights come with this hardware and we will just take the bracket, put it on here, slide the long bolt through. Then I guess we'll use the lock washer on this. And what I was saying earlier, our clearance is somewhat limited inside here. If we jam this through, there's room for one of the nuts to hold it in place, but we obviously can't cinch it down all the way because that's interfering. So let me grab my hardware, and I think I have a bunch of random washers or something we can use there. Maybe these will work. Anytime I get a TV wall mounting kit, I always keep all the little spacers and everything that they come with. Ooh, that might be what we need. Yeah, I think that might work. Now, again, you can just use a random nut or a stack of washers or something to that effect to accomplish the same thing here. I just happen to be a hoarder of hardware and keep all this stuff lying around. The nice thing with the brackets that these lights come with is they have facilities to hold a nut in place. If you look right here and here, you can see if we slide a nut in there, it should, yeah, just fits. Yeah, they don't quite fit in there, but if we tighten this down, think that should be good. Perfect. On the chair these are going on, we do need a little bit of space between the bottom of the seat pan and where the lights are pointing. So I think that should give us enough. Now, obviously, you can use other mounting hardware. You can get, you know, like one of these style of clamps or something like that. We have Beavis and Butthead here. You can use something like that. You can get some sort of other generic clamp. But I think in this case, these should work fine. Is that magnetic? Yeah, it is. So it takes a fair amount of force. That was what I was worried about, is we've got a big moment arm here, and that force can easily dislodge this, but that's actually pretty strong. All right. For the application of my friend's chair, this will work fine. All right, cool. Had to ditch the hoodie. It was getting a little warm in here. Something I should have mentioned earlier. A lot of you are probably thinking, well, when I plug the charger into my chair, it makes it stop moving. Well, that's handled by this third pin down here, and we have not connected that. So you'll be able to plug this into your joystick, assuming you wired it correctly, and it will not affect your chair moving. Okay, we've got our connector. We've got a way to mount our lights now. Let's take a look at this sort of crappy maybe switch that we bought. I mean, I'm sure it'll work fine, but I want to look at this mechanism here and see what we're getting ourselves into. Let's pull this band clamp off. And I just guessed on the diameter. I just kind of bought one of these at random. I thought the connection was a little bit different. There's other versions of these where as you tighten these screws, it sucks these down in further. Turns out this one is not that way. So we may have to kind of space some things up or put something in here to make this connection a little tighter. But now that I'm looking at this, that might be tricky. Our mechanism is right there. Look at that. So if we wrap the bar on his chair with electrical tape and then try to clamp this on here, it could very easily interfere with that. This is strange. I feel like there's a piece missing here or something. But yeah, it's and switch, I guess. It comes with these random connectors on the end, which we obviously shan't be needing, so goodbye, whatever you are, connectors. Made it in the box. These are my new favorite wire strippers, I think. Yeah, look at that. So fancy. That is some very small gauge wire. Let's fire up one of these lights and see what our actual amperage pull is. I've tested these in the past, and they do actually have a power converter in them. They're not just burning a resistor at increasingly higher and higher load as you turn up the voltage. But I'm just curious to see here what our voltage pull is going to be. Let's connect this up, and the power supply is unfortunately off screen. Actually, here, I'll set up the GoPro so I can overlay this in this video. Firing up the power supply. Let's bring this up to about 10 volts and see if it turns on. Nope. A little more voltage. Wait a minute. Is this light dead? Oh, one of our wires came off. That'll do it. I did buy one of these light kits once, and one of the lights was bad. I was like, no. Okay, let's turn this back down. Put it at like 6 volts and see at what point this turns on. Oh, so comes on at 6 volts. Actually looks like the proper voltage. Hang on. What is the... You can never really tell what the ratings actually are on these things. And there's no documentation in there. So it works at 6 volts, as you can see, and we're pulling 1.16 amps. However, as we go up in voltage, we should get less and less amperage, and the brightness of this should stay the same. So let's ramp this up here. See we're up, oh, I wasn't paying attention. We're up at 20 volts now, and we're only pulling 380 milliamps. Let's go up a little more. 24 volts. Our brightness has stayed exactly the same. So that tells me we have actual switching circuitry in there. So we're at 24 volts. Let's go up a little higher, see if anything gets crazy. 27, yeah. So the chair is going to be running about 24 to 27 volts depending on the batteries. And as you can see, we're under 300 milliamps for a light. So yeah, this wire here is very thin, but times 2, we're under 600 milliamps. And I mean, this stuff is probably fine for an amp, but yeah, awesome. Good rule of thumb with power supplies is always turn the voltage back down before you turn them off. That way you don't blow the crap out of something when you hook it up next time. Oh, and they cut out at about 6 volts. Interesting. Also, this power supply defaults to the output being off every time you turn it on. Wait, I think it does. Let me make sure. Output on, power off. Wait a few seconds, turn it back on. Yes, our output is off. All right, cool. So that is handy, but just good rule of thumb or best practices or whatever. Turn your voltage on your power supply down before you shut it off. I always put it at like 5 volts or something like that. But all right, cool. Our light works, and we're going to be pulling 600 milliamps maybe. Actually, let me double check. Worst case scenario, let's say the batteries on his chair are getting pretty dead. So let's run it down to like 20 volts or 19 volts and see what our power draw is. Okay, so there's 20 volts, we're at 300 milliamps. 19 volts, which your chair is going to shut off by the time you get to that point. We're at 325 milliamps. 18. It doesn't hit 400 till we're down to 15, and that's not going to happen. So, all right, cool. I am happy with that. It is now apparently the next day, and yeah, I'm moving around is annoying. Anyways, let's continue with this project. Last night was New Year's Eve or whatever, so went and hung out at a friend's place for a while. He's actually the one we're going to be installing the lights on this chair for, or however you'd say that. Anyways, I looked at his chair. Turns out that this switch right here is actually the perfect size to mount on the side guard or armrest bars on the side of his chair. So that should be good. And I verified that these do in fact stick to the bottom of his seat pan. And we're just going to kind of add some wiring to this. The thing with building a portable lighting kit like this is it's not going to be permanently installed or designed specifically for that chair. So there's going to be a little bit of extra wiring hanging out here and there. But I realized that my new bounder is pretty similar proportions to his chair. And the way the seat pan is, we can stick the lights underneath it. So I'm going to kind of extend out these wires a little bit on the lights. And then we're going to pull that chair in here and figure out how long we want the wires. He told me where he wanted the switch mounted on his chair. So I think we should be good. We've got one more fuse holder here. I'm down to my last one. And by the way, the whole scandal with Amazon fuses, I think tomorrow on the live stream, we are going to test some of these. I have had these things blow before and they seem to work. Like whatever brand I happen to get. I mean, brand is kind of a pointless statement because Amazon just uses random word generators for brand names, but we're going to test a few of these and see. I'm just really curious. I know a few of the people have done that, but I just want to know about these ones that I have here to see if they're any good. Obviously, you want to buy name brand fuses, but we're going to stick a 7.5 amp one in there. You want your fuse to be smaller capacity than the smallest wire in your system. And this stuff here on this switch has me a little bit worried. I mean, we could probably run a 5 amp fuse since these are going to pull less than an amp each. But anyways, let me grab some stuff real quick and then we will get to wiring these up or extending the wires a little bit. I'll get the old soldering iron fired up here, and we're just going to add kind of an arbitrary length of wire to each one of these. Seeing as how my friend is not going to have that chair for necessarily an extended period of time, I want this light kit to be usable on other chairs as well. So we're just going to do maybe, what's that, about 28 inches of wire or something like that. Should probably be using larger diagonal cutters for this. I forgot how annoying PVC wire is. It tries to curl up and then rips everything off your desk for you automatically. Then we're going to use some heat shrink. I need a wrist rest or something I can rest my elbows on to hold them at elevation for this. Let me grab our heat gun and its attachment that I love. Here we have a cordless Ryobi heat gun. These things are not nearly as hot as traditional mains-powered heat guns, but they're handy for these applications. And this one comes with a few attachments. Check out this one. It's sort of a little like, woo, heat ramp sort of thing. And what you do is stick your heat shrink down in that little area, and it concentrates and focuses the heat to get your heat shrink all set up. Let's see if we can illustrate this. And it kind of blows the heat around from all sides, so you don't have to move the thing around nearly as much, and it'll evenly shrink everything up. At least that's the theory. There we go. Why is this thing sounding like that? Is our battery low? Oh, yeah, the battery needs to be charged. Anyways, I'm going to solder on the rest of these connections, and I'll be back. We're finishing up on our second light here. Now, obviously, I'm going a bit overkill soldering all these connections. You could use some connectors like some of the knockoff Wagos, or the crimp-on butt connectors, or battery tender connectors, any number of things. This could be done definitely with a quick and dirty method that is not nearly as obnoxious. However, if you decide to go that route, make sure you put a fuse in. That is really the only important thing. Well, that, and never ground anything to the chassis of your chair. I said that earlier, really big deal. The chassis of the chair should never be grounded to battery negative. If you do that, you will 100% have problems. It appears as though we now have two of these lights, and we have probably about 28 to 30 inches of wire on the end of these. And we can move on to connecting up our switch, interfacing that with our XLR power, and obviously adding a fuse. Quick sanity check here. Just realized we should probably make sure I wired this correctly. These lights can handle reverse polarity, but again, it's best practice not to assume that's going to be the case. Let's see here. I'm far too lazy to take this stuff out of here. Okay, and then the negative. All right, we're good, yay. Usually when I'm working on projects like this, I like to have all the wiring cut to the exact length it needs to be and everything. But in this case, since it's going to be portable and designed to go on a bunch of different chairs, we can't really do that. So I think we're going to switch the negative side of this. And simply because my hands are not cooperating as much as I'd like today, we're just going to do the standard twist and solder method here. Trying to interleave all of the strands is becoming somewhat obnoxious, so we'll just skip that part. Again, we're not trying to pass logic level signals or high current or anything like that. It's gonna be under an amp for some lights. Ah! Remember how I said I hate PVC wire? I usually just kind of jam it next to the side guard on my chair to hold it in place. Everything's just constantly trying to escape. Okay, negative to negative, a little heat shrink action here. Then we'll grab our fuse and get that set up. I'm probably going to go back around and add some electrical tape over a few of these connections. I mean, heat shrink is fine and all, but I like to give multiple layers of protection on a lot of this stuff. And I think what we're going to do, I cut this shorter on one side. We're going to attach this sort of like this. Then I'm going to zip tie this to the cable. I don't know why I'm doing that. This is what I decided to do. Probably would have been nice to have some fuse holders that had less than 16 gauge wire or whatever this is, but it's what I happen to have on hand. So this comes down from our charging port. This is going to kind of tuck into the side of his chair somewhere. Fuse will go in there. Then we have our fused power coming out here and the negative side from the switch. And we will grab all of our lights and get those hooked up over here. I think we're going to, let's see, what's our length light? One is obviously shorter than the other now. Yeah, we're gonna add a bunch of heat shrink to this to kind of bind the end of these together as they get closer to the connection point. And I think we'll do one more on here. And these aren't really necessary for strain relief or anything. I'm just trying to make this a little bit less unruly as we're putting everything together. Guess we can strip these a little longer since we're going to be joining a whole bunch of stuff together. And we'll just do the whole twist and solder arrangement. Which, because this is aluminum wire, as you can see, immediately comes untwisted. And now, how do we want to do this? This is going to go in the back. This will be in the front. And I think he has sort of a pouch on the side of his chair. So I think we're going to have everything kind of come together here. The switch is going to be here. We'll have this massive stuff. And then this will plug into the joystick up front. So I think we'll just kind of bundle all this together right here and call that a day. Again, some little Vago connectors, or I think a lot of people pronounce it Wago, but a lot of the Vago connectors would be good for this sort of thing, or any other number of options. I don't know if my soldering iron is even going to deal with this. I'm going to crank this thing up to 450 and see if we can get it to do anything at all. I mean, actually, it's taking solder pretty well. I am shocked. Apparently just cranking up the temperature to compensate for a lack of thermal mass in this case seems to be working. Weird. Yeah, that went all the way through. All right, that'll do. Let's see, kind of checking our layout here. And I think we're going to drop this down to a 5 amp fuse. I think that should be sufficient. If not, if for some reason the fuse keeps blowing, which it shouldn't. These lights don't really have inrush current to speak of, but if he does have an issue with it, I'll just bump it up to a 7.5 amp fuse, but I think we should be okay. I wonder if the calibration for temperature on my soldering iron is off, because this works significantly better. I've got it set to 460, which at that temperature should be very quickly corroding the tip, but it's not. So maybe this thing's just running cooler than I thought. I normally solder connections at like 350, 375, somewhere in there, but it's working way better with the temperature cranked up over 400. Interesting. Okay, nice solid connection. More electrical tape. And because this wiring is so small and it's connecting to much larger wire, we're going to attach all this back and zip tie the crap out of it, because this wire, if you just pull on this, it'll just rip internally. Well, actually the whole thing will just rip, and we don't want that. So how do we want to do this? This is going to be such a wad of wiring when we're done. I usually try to lay this in a way to where positive and negative conductors are also not smashed up against each other. Yeah, I think this will work. Again, portable lighting kit. It goes against all of my fibers of OCD to do this, but yeah. Right now, he's just using one of those little Amazon like USB phone charger light combo things that you plug into the charging stick or charging port. And I mean, it works, but like, this is going to be a lot better for sure. Okay, I do believe we might be ready to test this. We have our power coming in here, runs through a fuse, runs through a switch, and then goes out to our two lights. So let me plug it into my chair, I guess. And I think the switch is off. Switch is off. Let's put our fuse in. Man, these things are so tight. There we go. And let's see if we let the smoke out. Hey, it works. We have two lights. Awesome. And our switch seems to function. All right, cool. Well, there you go. It works. Before I forget, we're gonna swap this out for a 5 amp fuse. Yeah, again, tomorrow, we're gonna test a bunch of these fuses on the live stream, I think. This should be super interesting. It's one of those things where it's like, how hard is it to screw up a fuse? But then Harbor Freight managed to screw it up. I had the issue with Harbor Freight years ago. The fuses don't blow, they just melt. And there we go. That's never coming back out. And then they started having issues with the jack stands, which is something else that I thought you can't screw up. And then all the stuff with Amazon. So yeah, anyways. All right, here's our completed. Let's see if you can do this in an aesthetically pleasing sort of way. Here is our entire light kit. We have the power from the chair. We have our not so fancy switch and two lights. A wild bounder appears in the chat. So this thing already has lights on it, but we have access to the seat pan in the front, and we can test our new lighting kit with this chair, I think. So let's see if I can. There's never enough room anywhere. Come here, lighting kit. Supposedly, all we need to do is grab these here lights, and they should magnet themselves under here. There we go. Now, obviously, we'd want to run the wiring underneath the chair and get all that sorted out properly. On my friend's chair, like I said, he's got sort of a bag over here, so this can kind of like tuck up behind that. And then his armrest, it's not a cantilevered one, and there's room on a bar, kind of like that one on the back, so that'll tuck away in there. And let's see how this plugs in here. Yeah, no problem. Then all we have to do is hit yawn button, and look, we have lights on the front of this thing. And I suppose if you're really having a problem with someone, you can just reach down here, grab one of the lights, and pencil beam it right into their eyeballs. But yeah, I think this is should be a decent setup, at least till he gets his new chair. He's also going to be getting a bounder at some point soon. But for the time being, his Quantum needs some proper lighting. And if you ask me, that is significantly better than nothing. Actually, let's test it with the bounder lights here. Okay, those are significantly brighter. You can barely even see these ones in comparison. Don't get me wrong, though. These things are very bright. If we compare them to the Permobile, we'll shine them at the same wall here. Actually, yeah, these aren't too bad. I think the camera's kind of playing tricks, but here's the Permobile lights on my chair. And then if we turn on those other ones, you can see they're pretty bright as well. These are kind of more of a spot beam. So if you get them low to the ground, you can kind of fan out the pattern a little bit. But the nice thing is, even though they are a spot beam, all the light kind of reflects around and does whatever. Now, obviously, if I was sitting in this chair, my legs would be in the way, but My friend's chair doesn't have that issue, so anyways, there we go. I think we'll call that a thing. Yay.